Welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I am your host, Brian Call, and on today's episode, we visit with our good friend, Beau Martonik. I met Beau a number of years ago at the Total Archery Challenge in Pennsylvania that my friend Sean DeGray was running, and Beau was helping out down there, and we clicked. And then I was on his first podcast episode, which is called East Meets West.
Really?
Yeah, and we talked, he kind of did the whole podcast purchase and got involved in it and started putting out a show. And I really like Beau. If you don't like Beau, something's wrong with you. The guy is just a good human being, loves hunting, easy to get along with, friendly, upstanding dude. So we just talked today kind of about Western, Eastern hunting. He's been backpack hunting, in some late season kind of mountain stuff, public land for whitetail in Pennsylvania.
Isn't he like a mountain whitetail guy?
Yeah, kind of. It's sort of we talk about that. We also talk about, we go on this tangent because I'm really curious about it. The decked truck bed thing.
It's like a truck bed organizer.
Yeah.
They put shelves in your truck bed.
Yeah. And I know a bunch of people who have it, but I've seen him talk about it a bunch. So I picked his brain. We talk about that on this show. And, I want it.
Really?
Yeah, I think I want it.
When I was at school, there was a kid who made his own version of that from wood, and he bought rails and stuff from Home Depot. Ugly as homemade sin. But I mean, it rolled out.
Yeah, I mean, I think about it all the time because I'll use my canvas cutter bedroll in the back of my truck. But, I got gear around it. I got to shift it around. If everything's organized in the back of my truck, man, and then you can just sleep on top of that. There's plenty of room for my Yeti coolers to slide on top. Everything I need. I don't need that bottom foot or whatever, foot and a half of the bed. I got the canopy. It just makes sense. So it was a good, cool conversation. I think you're going to like this show. I like Beau. Before we get started, don't forget we have a limited time coupon code with Alpaca Rafts. We keep plugging those guys because we love those rafts. Can't go wrong with that gear in your kit. Right now, you can see those rafts in action if you go watch our bear hunt series that we just published on YouTube. And if you leave us a comment on our bear hunt series, you're entered to win a brand new Stealthy Hunter rifle cover. Ryan Lampers has come out with that new product, and we're giving them away to a few people who like the videos and leave a comment. So excited about that. Check that out. And you can get a link to Ryan's rifle covers below in the description field of this YouTube video. Go to briancall.com. You can find everything there, links to our YouTube. And for those that follow, the drill. Mountain Ops, Seek Outside, Heather's Choice, and Sissy Sticks are all partners of ours that offer savings and discounts if you use the code GRITTY or GRITTY2020. Check out the description field and you'll see all the information there with links and the codes that you can save with. And every time you support those companies, you support us, and we really appreciate that. So without further ado, enjoy the show. All right, folks, welcome to the Gritty Podcast. Today I am meeting with an old friend of mine, Beau Martonik. And you're out of the Pennsylvania area, right? The hardwoods back there?
Yep, I'm from north central Pennsylvania.
And we first met at the Total Archery Challenge in Seven Springs in Pennsylvania, 4 years ago, maybe?
Yeah, I think it's been 4 years now.
So it's been a while, and you also started a podcast a couple years ago as well. And I got to be a guest early on as you began that journey. So how's it been treating you?
It's been good. And it's funny, Brian, because I first started talking to you about the podcast and asking you questions about, the podcast gear and everything. And now it's funny because when I asked you about it, and you're like, if you're serious, about it, I'll help you out with getting it ready. And now I get it because now that's the most question I get asked, what do I need to start a podcast? But anyways, so you helped me, and actually all the gear that I use and the way I record is all stuff that you had recommended to me. And so it took me about 9 months after that to get it going. And you and Jordan were my first guests. So you were on episode number 1.
Oh yeah,
of the podcast, and now I'm 120 in. So
that's wild.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I was curious. On today's podcast, I have a few things. I want to talk to you about some gear that you're using that I've seen from afar on Instagram. Curious about similar pieces of kit for my hunts. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the podcasting journey and what that's been like. And I want to talk to you about hunting in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So that's kind of where I want to go today. You cool with that?
I'm good with that, Brian. Whatever direction you take me, I'll go with it.
Okay. So tell me about this gear wise. Tell me about this like truck bed thing that you're using to store your gear. Deck it or something or
decked. Yes, decked.
What do you call it?
It's called decked. DECKED. Decked.
Okay.
So decked, yeah, they're out of Idaho, and basically I have a topper or a cap on my truck, and I use it to store all of my hunting gear in there. It pulls out basically a drawer of a dresser. There's 2 drawers. It's the full length of your bed. It's water sealed. It's dust proof. Like everything in there is almost like it's sealed in a really good container. Yeah. And it can also hold up to, I think it's 1,500 pounds on the top of it. Mm-hmm. So like some people use them without a top and they'll park an ATV on it or whatever else, and for me, it was great because I can still use room to store my coolers and all my other gear, backpacks when I'm going on trips. But inside those storage systems, I can keep all of my truck camping gear, whether that's my putting up my tarp and my chairs. And for whitetails in Pennsylvania, I keep my trail cameras in there. I keep all of my food, all my backpacking meals, all that stuff is in there, ready to go. It's almost like a prepping type thing too. Like I feel like I could live out of my truck at any point and just pull it out. So it's pretty cool.
I've been watching and I've seen a few other guys with it as well. And I'm a little jealous. It does look like it's a really efficient use of your truck bed. Right now, I got totes and stuff and I throw them in there and then I got to crawl over a bunch of stuff to get to my gear and pull it out. It's really not a very useful way to pack. But at the same time, I hate the idea of giving up my truck bed. But I'm looking at it and it's only taking up a little bit of the bottom of the truck bed. I got my truck cap on there, my canopy, so I still have plenty of room to throw my Yeti coolers in and stuff like that.
Yep. Yeah, that's the thing is I was really skeptical of it because of that reason. I didn't want to use up truck space, and I'm like, well, I leave my cap on all the time anyways. So for me to really utilize it like a truck bed with hauling stuff that's hanging out of it, I wasn't really doing that a whole lot anyways.
Yeah.
So for me, it was like, this only sticks up, I don't know if it's 12, 14 inches or maybe a little bit taller, but it doesn't go the whole way up. Yeah. And I can fit a 120 quart cooler on top. I actually had a 160 quart Yeti in there. No problem with clearance. You can still put a SKB bow case on top of that. So when I went out to Idaho this past year, we had the deck system loaded down, which I'm actually working on an article that has everything I have inside that, because I've never seen where anyone kind of does a load out of their truck when they go on hunting trips. So anyways, I have that all written down, and we had 3 guys in my truck, and it's only a 5.5 foot bed Chevy. And we went the whole way to Idaho and came back with a cooler full of meat and everything else, and it all fit in there. I'm not going to say that it fit with a lot of room, but it was there.
Well, it does seem like there's, I was looking at my truck after I was, voyeuristically watching your Instagram page and some of your stories. I was like, you know what? I don't even use that space, from the top of where my cooler might sit to the ceiling of my canopy. I don't even use it. So if I did have something on the bottom, I was like, I don't think I think it's only going to give me more room.
Yeah. And like I said, with having those drawers, it just makes it so much easier. Like you're not crawling in there, like you were saying.
Yeah.
You can I've seen people put their rifles in there. You can put foam in there. There's a million ways of customizing it. I just keep it pretty simple. And I have like a high lift jack and some other different things that, as far as recovery stuff for my vehicle, and, just fill it with a bunch of good stuff there.
I've got a cargo trailer that I've been sort of messing around with and want to convert into sort of a traveling camper / podcast studio. So, but having a better storage place in the back of the truck. I mean, we used it this year in Arizona when we were hunting down there. And we had 4 cots in the back of the trailer, and we were just sleeping on these cot bunks, and it was nice and handy. And So I'm looking at the option. It is nice to have, everything ready to rock and kind of stored and where you can live right out of your truck. And that was my next question on the gear kit is it looks like you have a rooftop tent or of some kind, but you didn't go with like a Tepui, or it looks like it's a hard top kind of.
Yeah. So most people think it's like one of those storage, I don't know what they even call them, that you put clothes in and stuff when, the people
like
that put them on their Subarus. Rack,
like a Yakima cargo container.
Yeah. Yes, like you see the families putting them on the minivans going on vacation and stuff. Right. That's what it looks like. But what it is it's a tent that pops up. It's a hard shell. It's made out of fiberglass. It's just like the outside of a boat. It can withstand all the weather. It pops up in like less than 60 seconds. And has a memory foam mattress in there, a little solar powered fan. I mean, this is like sleeping in a bed. After this last hunt where I spent like 17 days sleeping in that, I don't want to backpack anymore. It's like, because it's so comfortable.
So, I've looked at some of the other ones, that are more of a tent material, and this has a hard top, kind of hard bottom situation. Yeah. It seems like the tent ones take a little bit to fold up and get into position. And my issue was, like I use a canvas cutter a lot, and I throw it on the bedroll on the ground, climb right in, sleep, memory foam. I'm out cold. I can put it anywhere I want. And then I get up, I roll it up in the morning and toss it in the back of my truck, and I move on. The thing with the tent is it's like like a Tepui, you pop it up, fold it out, got your ladder, you climb inside, all that, and then it's like, okay, we're going to go hunt now. I got to collapse it, fold it all in, and it looks like, and then you got to put a cover over it. It just looks like it's a little bit of a maintenance job. And I don't want to deal with that. So this one, does it quick pop up and go down? Is it like a really easy to?
So it's by myself, I can put it away in probably 2.5 to 3 minutes. And what's nice about it is it has air vents on the side. So you can put it away pretty wet, like relatively wet. And as you drive, it circulates air and dries out the entire thing. So really? that's what's nice, because you know how much it sucks to be able to take down a wet tent, you pack it away. And from what I'm told by people that own some of those other ones that are soft ones, it kind of sucks to have to do that. You have to air it out and you can't put it away wet. So right. This one's made by James Baroud. I picked it up when they were selling them in New Jersey at the time, and I picked one up, and it's been awesome for me. It's been really cool to be able to pop it up and go. Like this past year when I was elk hunting, I would sleep in it and put it down, get in my truck, and drive to a specific area that I was going to hunt that day. And it wasn't a big deal to be able to tear it down. And that's what's so nice about it. You can be really mobile with your vehicle and still be comfortable there.
Yeah, I'm looking at the pictures there online. It does look pretty handy. I got to say, I like the simplicity of it, popping it up and then popping it down. I haven't looked at, I've looked at a few. I have a rack on the truck ready to go. I just haven't figured out which rooftop tent I want to use, just because there's a few out there, So, yeah, I had heard some people put these hardcover ones up, and I've heard mixed reviews on how they perform,
Yeah. And I've only ever used the one, so I don't really have a great comparison to other companies or other ones, but for me, it's worked awesome. I've been using it for 2 years now, and spent a lot of nights in it, and for me, it's done the job. I keep a sleeping bag up there, a pillow, everything just folds down to it. I pop it up, it's ready to go.
I like the idea of that, especially when we were in the trailer. I was like, man, Ben snores, I'd like him to be in the rooftop tent. I'd like to kick a guy out of the camper. or have a little bit, when we go family camping, have a little place where we put the kids or myself.
It's funny because when we go on these trips, I was with a bunch of my buddies and my friend Justin, who was filming the hunt, and they're like, that fits two people up there. I said, no, this is mine. Yeah, I'm not putting two guys in the top of this. You guys can have your tents.
Well, I'm going to check that one out. Between the decked and that, I've been looking at the van life stuff, following different people. Always follow Sam Soholt. He's a good follow, and he's got the new van instead of, because driving the bus around the countryside is not easy. So he's got the van life going, and I really like that. It's hard to give up a truck though, and I like the camper idea because I can leave the camper set up. It's just a cargo trailer that's converted, but I can just leave it and drive off. With the van, I gotta sort of pack up because that's my hunting rig and my camp. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but there's times where say again.
I thought about getting like a trailer, like a small off-road trailer. I'm not sure if that's kind of what you're talking about, but putting a rack on it to be able to put the tent on there where I could just leave it and, drive away and then actually be able to use a truck bed for things. But I just haven't been able to justify it at this point. Everything's been working and I should just leave it go, but you know how that goes.
No, I've seen it with a cargo, I've seen the Jeep trailers, kind of what you're talking about, like a backcountry Jeep trailer that they throw the rooftop tents on top of, and mine's a 16-foot, cargo trailer where I can drive a UTV inside the back. I can pop up cots in there. We're looking at insulating it, adding shower, sink, and all that kind of stuff, and build it out because it's cheaper to do that, and it's how I want it.
Yeah,
and it costs a fortune to buy a new, finished RV, and they're not built well at all. So I owned a construction company for years, built lots of houses, do the plumbing, the electrical. Like, it's basically the same thing, just with some RV parts instead of a true home sink and kitchen,
Yeah.
And, but it's all that's the same. So my dad lives right here local. We've been talking about outfitting it and getting it ready to go. And then I can also tow it to TAC or whatever, and then go, hey guys, let's podcast,
and jump in the trailer / camper / podcast studio.
That's the plan. I want it to be a cruising man cave, but there are times where I want to just ditch the trailer, bomb out on a trip. And it would be nice to have a rooftop tent up there, and ditch the trailer, and just go light, because I won't be there that much, but still have that back at camp, back at the trailhead or whatever. It's nice. But there are hunts like the ones I did this year, some mule deer hunts I did that were straight up, we hike into the backcountry, never use the truck, elk.
Yep.
But then there are a couple of days where we come back to the trailhead to resupply, and we might stay there. It's nice. But then there are hunts like Arizona where we camp in the same spot every night in a camper or something.
Yeah.
And so I want to have the ability to have a good car camp, basically. I got the backcountry thing sorted out. I want a luxurious car camp now.
Yeah. And the thing is with the trailers is, there was a spot I was hunting in Colorado a few years ago, and to get there, the road was so bad. Like, I shouldn't even have had my truck there. I wondered why everyone had Toyota Tacomas or 4Runners or Jeeps. And then there's me trying to fit a full-size truck, back these mountain roads that were pretty bad, and so but I guess that's why most of the guys that do that, they'll usually have ATVs or something that they drive in from there.
Well, that's what happened this year. I was late season hunting mule deer, bow hunting in the snow, and it was gnarly. And I was driving my brother's Jeep. I borrowed his Jeep for the trip, but within a couple of days of intense snow, I couldn't take the Jeep where I needed to go. So that was a frustration of mine. And I ended up getting on the back of Anthony's four-wheeler and having to ride in the snow. And I just decided, okay, it's time for me to have a four-wheeler or a UTV of some kind for those hunts. I don't want to try to drive a full-size truck. I really can't drive a full-size truck into these areas, chained or not. It's just not a good idea. and we're going miles in to get to where these big, huge bucks are. And then we're hiking in on foot from there. But you can't really, it sucks to camp out there. It was like negative 10 or 15 degrees. And, sometimes it's been much colder than that. So it's just nice to have a base camp and to be able to drive in there and drive out. So my goal this year is a little bit of insulation in the cargo trailer, a little conversion. It'll be fun to mess around with, and a UTV of some kind of off-road ATV, whatever that can get me back there. Some hoopty that's used that I can pay for, and because I really don't use it all that often, except for I'm going to use it on that hunt. I just need to get in and out through the snow,
Yep.
So anyway, it'll be cool.
Yeah, sounds like it.
So changing gears, I want to ask you how the podcast life has been. You're almost 200 episodes into this thing. Let's introduce people on my platform to your podcast. What's it called and where can they find it?
So my podcast is called the East Meets West Hunt Podcast. And I started it with the mindset of when I started going out west, I started going out elk hunting in 2016 with no idea what to do, where to start. And, I started finding podcasts around that time and listening to yours and some other ones that I had found at that time and reading forums and everything online. I was just pulling information from a bunch of different places. Anyways, I ended up making it happen. And when I got back, I wrote a story about it just for myself. And I submitted it to the Journal of Mountain Hunting, Adam Yonke, and he ran it as a subscriber story. It was my first ever published article, and I titled it East Meets West. And it was basically just explaining this adventure style hunt coming from Pennsylvania, going to Colorado. And I got feedback from people online that were like, man, I wish I could do that. I wish I had your kind of money. All these things that were just untrue, Right. And I was like, no, it really wasn't that difficult. Like I just did this research and figured it out. But anyways, long story short, I decided that there was a resource gap and information from people from the East planning trips out west. And I figured me wanting to learn more about this kind of stuff, I could interview people that would not only help myself, but help others that were doing that. And in addition to that, I grew up in the Appalachian Mountains of Pennsylvania, which in my opinion, the whitetail hunting has a mixture of that, has that Western vibe to it. And so just kind of exploring something that people don't talk about, hunting whitetails in the mountains or anything. So it was a new kind of platform. And now I'm 120 episodes in, 2 years into this thing, and it's been awesome. I've enjoyed it.
So tell me this, what have been some of your hottest episodes that have had the most, traction what is it that people were looking for from you?
Anything with the title Mountain Bucks in it, which is usually has to do with hunting whitetails in the Appalachian Range, Pennsylvania, West Virginia. Yeah. I've had a good friend of mine from Idaho on, Troy Pottinger, who hunts right up in northern panhandle of Idaho. And that's a big hot topic there. Whenever he's on, he's always energetic and does really well for himself with killing big deer. So that helps. But those episodes are the best. And also anything with gear, anything I talk about, gear for an elk hunt or whatever that might be, those usually get the best ones.
Yeah. I always feel like if you do gear, I always feel like doing gear is sort of almost cheating, because people love to hear any gear podcast. I can pad my downloads with that pretty easy. Just talk about gear. It's crazy for me, that or talking about elk or mule deer, whether it's calling elk or hunting mule deer, that stuff always gets hammered as well. That's just what people want to hear. Lately though, the last year, fitness, getting fit and getting strong for the backcountry has been, it's ironic. The health and the fitness shows have been doubling in performance for everything else I do, even my gear stuff. So that's been, and it's fine because I like that topic. I find it really, fascinating. So that's been kind of my experience, but it doesn't surprise me on the mountain buck thing. You look at the hunting public and their public land whitetail hunts that they're doing all over, they're on fire. People are tuning into
Oh yeah.
that like crazy. And so clearly there's a market for that, and they're not getting a lot of competition in terms of people that are because they're commanding that audience quite well. So I think it's your neck of the woods and what you're into. I know for me, when I follow your IG stories, it's always tuning into your whitetail mountain hunt stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really cool. I love getting to do that and hunt, because it's just so different than what you see again in content and magazines and on TV. You see Midwest farm country whitetail hunting, and this, I'm doing backpack whitetail hunts and just doing different types of things that you don't see. And there's 5.4 million hunters just throughout the Appalachian range, from Georgia all the way up through Maine. There's a lot of hunters there, and a lot of them are hunting this way, just never had those resources out there. So that's kind of what I've been trying to do.
My question is, the whitetail market dwarfs the Western hunting market. It's just a huge market. My question is, when you're out there hunting those deer, with all those people back there, do you find that you can get away from folks in some of these remoter areas? There's more remote land available than people think.
Yeah. I mean, just in Pennsylvania alone, the northern part of the state where I live has over 2 million acres of public land, and that's mostly unbroken timber. And it's, some of it's really rugged. Just, I've hunted in a lot of places out west, but when you add a mix of rocks with oak leaves on it, that makes it slippery. It's just, it's difficult country to hunt. For most of the archery season, if I see 1 or 2 hunters in a week to 2 weeks of hunting, I'll be lucky. I mean, I don't see very many people. Yeah.
Are you finding some big bucks in some of these areas, pockets?
Yeah. I mean, you're not going to find, but you can find some that rival some of the Midwest deer, but for the most part, they don't have the nutrition and everything that you're going to get in some of these, Iowa or some of these other places. But you're getting age. I mean, you're getting
what I was going to say is
really old, gnarly deer.
I killed a buck. We call them Big Sexy in Ohio with Owen Murphy over there at Latitudes Outdoors. This is all just hardwood forest land. It's not been. There's no farm bucks. There's nothing special been done. These are just bucks that are out there, and you didn't find necessarily bucks that are these big, giant 190-inch whitetails and stuff, 170, but you are finding old bucks with lots of mass and character, and they might be a 130s, 140s buck, but they're old. And so to me, they still, even though that's all they score, they still have the mass and the age characteristics that's all I care about, really, at the end of the day.
Well,
I just want to chase something that's been around a long time. That's a challenge.
And one of my oldest deer that I killed was 8.5 years old, and it only scored 126 inches.
Yeah,
it was like 14 inches wide, just a dark chocolate horn, had like a cow looking face on it. I mean, that's my favorite deer to date. It was such a cool, hunt. And we do have deer that get really, really big, but they're so few and far between. The majority of them, a mature deer, you're looking at 120 to 140 inch whitetail, versus that same age group, you might be in a 140 to 170, group in a Midwestern area.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it's sort of like blacktail in Oregon. Same thing. You're not, getting a massive deer, 160 inch or 150 inch buck is, rare, but I have a couple bucks in the house here. One of them just all it has is 2 monster bases, and then it comes up and it's just got thick chocolate horns, and it's older than dirt. And, but he doesn't score well, but that wasn't the point. He is my favorite buck. In fact, when people come into the room, I have them look around at all the animals in here and the antlers, and inevitably it is one of the bucks that everyone chooses. Like that, they're like, whoa, they just stare at it. It's kind of a freak. He's got some weird growth, but you just see age. Like you look right at him and you're like, that deer is old right off the bat. I don't know why that gets me excited, but it does.
Oh, me too. There was a buck that, between myself and family members, had I think it was 6 years worth of sheds off of this deer. I mean, it was just never could find him during the season. He was like a ghost, but he'd shed his antlers in the same spot every year and within the same side of the mountain at least. And I just found out someone found him dead, which he had died back in 2017, but they found the skull and partial of the antlers, and we figured he was close to 10 years old. I mean, this deer was just gnarly. The bases just had so many bumps on him, big brow tines, and me looking at that deer, I mean, he was 150-inch 8-point, which is giant, but like this was just the character of it is what did it for me more than the actual inches.
Yeah, and I think social media and TV, hunting TV and stuff has kind of warped people's enjoyment or idea of what a big deer is, and it's really an experience. And an 8-year-old deer, whether it's in Ohio or Iowa or in Pennsylvania, it's still an 8-year-old deer, and it had to get through. It had to evade a lot of lions and whatever other predators it's dealing with in these areas, and winters. And everything, and humans, to get to where it's at 8 years old plus, 5 years old plus, and man, that right there, just you can just see it when a really old deer comes into a set. Let's say you're in a tree stand or something, and you see that thing come in, you're just like, you're in the presence of a different kind of animal. Just the way it behaves, how alert it is, which way it looks, versus a 2 or 3 year old buck that comes in. There's no comparison, there just is not. And so I just get so excited by that, especially if they're all rutted up and their neck is swollen. And
that's my favorite. And like you said, you can tell by looking at them when their posture, when they're coming in, like they have a level of confidence that's, scary. You're like, I don't know how I'm going to compete with this thing when you're in the tree. And, it elevates my heart rate. I can tell you that.
So what have you found that has, you've been doing the podcast thing for a couple of years. How would you say you're different now, compared to 2 years ago in the woods? Any changes?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's been a lot of changes with the whitetail side of things. I've done it my whole life. And, I always felt like I had a way of doing it and had been relatively successful with it. But once I started interviewing other people that were hunting mountain bucks in different regions, I've been able to pull so much for it and just try different things. And, some of it's worked for me and some of it hasn't, but just being able to continually, I guess, mold my style has been really cool. I've changed the way I hunt. I don't even hunt out of regular tree stands anymore. I've been using a saddle. I don't know if you see, with being a Western hunter, if you see the saddle hunting thing with whitetail guys, but it's a big deal right now. And I was kind of really skeptical with it, but I started using that, and it's really lightweight, easy to set up. It's been fun to play with, and just my style has just changed, I guess. And then when it comes to Western hunting, being able to talk to so many great people from the West and even some from the East that have went out there, I've learned so much that has helped me, I wouldn't say become successful out there, but get lucky every once in a while, getting better at it every time. So
yeah, on the tree saddle thing, I remember I bought my first tree saddle by the Tree Saddle brand that went out of business. Gosh, I can't remember. It was when they first came out.
Okay.
And we use those tree saddles to kill blacktail when we'd go up to Mount Hood area and outside of Estacada in Oregon. A lot like what you're describing with your whitetails in Pennsylvania in the mountains. And there'd be snow. We'd hike in, find some fresh tracks, see where there's some pinch points and little travel corridors, and then we'll just shimmy up a tree and hang in that saddle for the day. And then if we see some deer, we could get down and actually sneak over and just climb right back up and set up. And so I had used that tree saddle even for elk. I was using that saddle, I don't know, for like 6 or 7 years. So I'd say it was 10 years ago that I got my first saddle, more than 10 years ago. And I loved it. Still love that type of hunting. But I think the new saddles are a lot lighter weight and more efficient than what we were using back in the day.
Yeah. I'd never used one of the older ones, but I'd been told that they've come a long ways as far as just, when I hunt the rut here, I'm sitting in it from dark to dark. So I'm sitting about 14 hours essentially in this saddle, and everyone's like, how is that comfortable? I said, well, you can adjust so many things. I can loosen it up and, kind of sit down and rest my knees against a tree. I use roofing knee pads that I put on the exterior, which I was wearing my Sitka Timberline pants with the knee pads, which that works, but I figured over time I'd end up wearing through that material since it wasn't meant for that. And so I put different knee pads on, and I'm able to either, stand or kind of slouch, do whatever throughout the day. And it's, for me, it's more comfortable being in a tree stand just because you can adjust in a bunch of different positions. So it's pretty cool. The one thing I haven't got real comfortable with doing yet is figuring out how to sleep in it, because normally in a tree stand, I just tighten up my harness and I can kind of, nod off, where in this, you start to lose your balance, you swing around the tree. So you gotta be a little bit careful.
I fell asleep in a few of those saddles back in the day. They're harder. The old ones, they'd still cut off the circulation a little bit in my legs if I didn't. I mean, you kind of had to adjust it back and forth and keep moving. But it wasn't really a saddle. It was just a more of a strap that you'd lean back on. But they sold a little saddle platform. Yeah. And so I used that platform with my tree saddle. And so then I could actually stand for quite a bit of the day and not sit at all. And I have a standing desk, have for more than 10 years. I stand all day long. I rarely sit. And so standing all day long in the stand is nothing for me. I don't need to sit down. And I like just having that platform. So I used that for a long time. But now it's not too bad to pack in a lone wolf hang on either. They're so light,
Yeah.
So it's just when you do have a saddle, it's pretty convenient because you have a lineman's belt already on it. You can quickly shimmy up there safely with your climbing sticks, get up there, strap in. You're ready to go pretty darn fast, and you get more shot angles, and it's quieter to hang because you're not really hanging the stand. Yep. So what is your what is your go-to ladder, steps, screw-ins? What do you use?
So on public land, we can't screw anything into the trees. So I have a set of aluminum sticks. The ones I'm currently using are from a company called Hawk, and I carry 4 sticks that can get me somewhere from 16 to 18 or 19 feet up. And so I'm using that and just running a lineman's belt around my saddle, around the tree. So I'm 100% tied off at all times. It's very safe to climb. I have a method where I hang everything on my hips as I'm going up. I never have to hit the ground from the time I start going up. Yeah. So I don't have to go back down and grab a step. Everything's efficient. I practice it going up and getting set up. It's really good. I remember a while ago, actually, this is something the podcast probably helped me with, was just being more organized. Once I started hearing people's, methods for doing this stuff, I'm like, I'd pull out my stand, I'd shoot my bow every day, all through the year. And then I wouldn't pull out my tree stand or anything until the first day of the season. And I'm fumbling around trying to get it set up. And now I practice that like I do my bow. And that makes it really efficient. You're quieter. You can slip in there and, make that really efficient. So,
yeah, that matters. Hanging a stand, even when we were hunting late season mule deer, lots of snow and sneaking in to a spot and finding a tree and getting up in a tree while they're rutting right next to you.
Yeah.
That's a challenge, and you can do it with skill and you can do it without skill. That is a skill. Getting in a tree is a skill.
It is. And so one of the things with hunting, these mountain bucks, it's so different than hunting, Midwestern whitetails. Is in the Midwest, you have a bed to food pattern, as I call it, bed to feed pattern. You have, an ag field or a food plot, and then you have a thicker area where they're bedding. And I'm not trying to make it sound as this easy. You set up in the middle. That's not how it is. But in theory, it is. That's you're trying to cut them off and with different parts of the year. Well, in the big woods, which I'm sure is similar to, blacktail and some of those areas. It's big timber. Your clear cuts are the best version or logging cuts are the best version of a food plot you're going to get.
Yep.
But it's still different because sometimes they're bedding in the middle of that. They're bedding and feeding in the same areas. So, I focus a lot on hunting the rut and the pre-rut, those areas. One, because that's when if I'm going to take the time off of work to hunt them, I'm going to hunt them in the time I have the best opportunity, which is when they're the most vulnerable in the rut. And so at that point, with low deer densities, these bucks are traveling miles and miles in a day. And it's really fun to be able to do that when you find a good day that, up on a ridge or in a creek bottom or whatever that might be. It can be really a blast. And other days you might go 3-4 days without seeing a single deer, and you second guess everything you thought you ever knew.
Yeah, I hear you. I feel like the migration mule deer that we hunted this year, it was a wild hunt, man. We saw some big bucks, and I had some bucks I should have capitalized on. I really underestimated mule deer from a tree stand. I just, for some reason, thought they were going to be an easy deer to kill from a tree versus whitetail, who are more accustomed to being hunted from above. Turned out I was dead wrong, and those mule deer picked me out of the old bucks, the old bucks. They it's like they see everything. Like they have vision that goes 360, and they weren't. It was, and the thing is you get a 3-year-old buck come cruising through, or a 4-year-old even. And he's on a doe and they're doing their thing, and you trick them. They come right under your stand. They run around. I could have shot him 6 times, right? It runs off. So it gives me this false sense of security being in this setup. And then sure enough, the day comes that a monster comes through the trees. He pins me right away.
Yeah.
Right away. You're like, what? I've tricked all these other deer. Do you see me? Like the one deer I want to kill? And then a couple hours later, same thing. Another giant buck shows up because there's a hot doe nearby. I could see it ramping up, right? And these smaller bucks were chasing her all over. I'm like, it's just a matter of time before second giant shows up, sees me, blows out. I'm like, how in the world? And, I realized just my setup was wrong. It was just wrong. And it'll fool an immature deer. It'll fool a deer a doe that's dealing with a fawn, or whatever. It'll fool a distracted deer. If I get a little wind or snow, that'll help cover me a little more. But it was really a poor setup, and I would never have set up like that in the Ohio woods on a whitetail because I had respect. I just figured they'd probably catch me, But I was dead wrong. Those mature mule deer are way, way more canny and intelligent and on the ball than I gave them credit for. So this next year is going to be fun because I'm going to give it another shot. And it's a lot like what you're talking about, where we're hiking in, we're finding a setup, figuring out where the wind's going, getting ourselves up in a tree. And my question leading into this, giving this whole explanation is, I get hammered by guys saying, why aren't you just spotting stock in these mule deer? And I'm like, look, I'm good. I'm pretty dang good at spotting stock, but crunchy snow in denser forested areas mixed with some open country, like good luck sneaking up on this deer. Like I have a really good chance if I can ambush him in the right spot from a tree, by the way, because you're so high, scent is different, visibility is different. And I realized with these deer, the best chance I have of killing a really big one is actually by sitting still. That's my feelings. And, my question for you is, are you out there spotting stock or do you sit the tree? And if so, why do you use one technique, not the other?
So I will hunt off the ground, and it's not really as much of a spot and stalk as it is more of a still hunting where you're just, because I'm not able to glass very far, but I'll do that if it's a rainy day where the sound is down, the leaves are quiet. Otherwise, you're not going to sneak up on a deer. But, or say during the rut, a tactic that my dad taught me to use, and he's killed a bunch of bucks this way, is he'll go into a thick logging cut, walk those logging roads with the wind in his face and grunt and snap sticks and act like he's another buck intruding in their bedroom, and has had them get up and come at, and he's shot him at 8-10 yards frontal that they're coming, into him. So I've done that kind of style off the ground, and also kind of just slipping around, more or less scouting and hunting at the same time. But for the most part, I'm going to be hunting them from above, just from the standpoint of it's so difficult to sneak up on them, because, and also the way they bed in the steeper terrain is they're bedding off the points of the hills. So they have the dominant wind blowing over their back. Then they have the daytime thermals coming up from the bottom, and good luck, getting at them.
Absolutely. Yeah. You bring
impossible.
up a good point. Especially blacktail on the west. If I got a good heavy rain, I was going to still hunt like every time, move around, because I got all that cover noise. They're not really on their feet as much because they don't like the rain either. So I'm kind of moving around. Same thing for the mule deer. We had a couple of heavy snows and a couple really windy days. Those mule deer in the heavy winds, they do not like to move around. They're the worst. Mule deer seem to be the worst. They tuck in a lot when the winds are just heavy. They're like, can't hear a predator. For whatever reason, they just don't like it. So I'll get up on my feet because I know they're not going to be cruising. So they're probably not going to cruise by my set. So it's good to get on the ground and just kind of glass and move. And so if the weather's gnarly, sometimes I will still hunt, but it's not spot and stock. Although I'll do that if, opportunistically, if I see one on a hill and I got a good wind. I mean, it's a gift from God. I'll go, but it's not. But as an overall like technique, that when it's super still and there's not a sound in the air, good luck, man. Good luck. It's just so hard to get within bow range. So, and I like waiting in ambush in a stand. I get to see bucks breeding does like right underneath me. Like the close encounters I get to have with deer. A lot of guys out west have never spent time in a tree stand, and over super active day of awesome tree stand hunting. When you're in a tree stand and you get to see like where you could jump on their back if you wanted to.
Yeah.
It is a really neat experience. You see deer behaviors and you're passing on bucks, especially if you're holding out for something bigger. And you just see things that you would never get to see at that proximity in a on the ground situation, spot and stock,
Yeah.
It's just a matter of time for the wind changes usually, or they bust you. And so because I've been in some magic moments in a tree stand, I'm okay with the horrible, boring days, because I know it's a matter of time before something really epic happens.
And I'll tell you what, after hunting out west, in say September for me, you hunt for longer than I do, but say I'm going for 2 weeks and I'm wore out after those trips. I welcome sitting in a tree stand. I mean, it's not, there's a different side of mental toughness that comes to sitting in a tree stand.
Yeah.
But I enjoy once I get in there, hike, set up my saddle or my stand or whatever, and just kind of relax, don't do a whole lot of thinking.
Yeah. By the time I finished my whole season of the whole, hiking, backcountry, killing, backpacking animals out, elk, mule deer, when we got to this kind of archery late season mule deer hunt, I was like, throw me in a tree, let me sit. I'm beat down. I looked 75 in that stand with my Santa Claus beard and just like, I was wrecked, but I was okay with that. It was fun to sit there and a different kind of reward, sit still. It takes mental toughness, like you said, but man, it was so cool to see. I really am like, man, I learned so much on that hunt. So I'm expecting to get a nice buck next year. If all things can hold. I think I can leverage what I learned and pull it off. So
that's interesting.
I'm curious, like for me, next year, my setup, what I noticed was when I was within close range of a mule deer buck, they were able to see me, and it's open country a little bit with sparse trees here and there. And it's hard to get super high because there's not a lot of tall trees, it's kind of desert-ish mountain area. So I'm getting up there as high as I can get, but and it's high. It's still 30 feet or so, but
Oh, wow. Okay.
but they're what I noticed was there's so little sound there when there's so much snow on the ground. Your sound just carries forever. It seems like everything's muffled in snow, and you can hear like a pin drop. And I forget what the term is for it. I looked it up and researched it a little bit. Why does sound carry really far on super, super cold days? And so if you walk out and it's negative 20 degrees and you talk with your normal voice on a road, your neighbor who is like 25 houses down from you can actually just hear you with your normal voice. So the question is why? How can they hear you from, those distances? And it's something to do with how sound travels and reverberates and the coldness. And so how those sound waves move. And go ahead.
What I was going to say, I experienced that same thing when I was up in Alberta. I was hunting up in the Beau zone there for whitetails, and it was
notorious for that problem.
It is like extreme. It's negative 20 degrees or so, and I was like, what do I hear? It's a crow's flapping his wings, and I'm looking for it, like acting like it's gonna come right by me, and it's like 200 yards across this open alfalfa field, and I was like, and then a coyote would run across the field, and you'd hear every footstep. Like it was, I'm like, no wonder these bucks are notoriously hard to kill because they hear everything. I mean, I had to bring my stand in and out every single day. Even I was hunting with an outfitter, Jim Holt Jr., and he makes sure you take your stand in every night. Yeah. Well, you got to take your stand in every day because if you leave it out, it'll creak and do all the different things, or it'll freeze with ice. And man, but the sound thing, that's what I was picturing in my head when you're talking about this mule deer hunt. And there's about this much room for error when it comes to that.
That's what happened. That's what I just didn't see that coming. And trying to come to full draw, just the sound of my arms moving in my jacket, it sounded like normally you wouldn't hear that sound at that elevation in a stand with the wind blowing. A deer won't hear it. I could just come to full draw. There's too many other sounds competing. On this day, nothing. It was soundless. And it seemed like my heartbeat, you could hear from 30 yards away. It was like, it was bad. It was such an eye opener. And when I came to just any movement at all, they heard and they looked. So next year, one of the things I want to make sure I do is, I know there was a couple areas where the bucks would always travel, and they present themselves in the open, but it's just instantaneous. There's no time. You don't know what animal is going to come through that tree into the open, and then it's thick cover again, and on this little window I have to shoot. And so one thing I've noticed with some guys hunting big bucks on mature bucks in late season like that is what they do is they set up so they have an obstacle between them
in front of them
and the buck. Yes. That's going to be what happens next year. I'm setting up so when that deer comes out, I don't have to move. I don't have to do anything. Nothing. I'd just be super silent, just watch him. And then when he goes behind that obstacle, whoom, that's when I come to full draw. And then he'll hear it, he'll see it, but he'll have to come back the way he came into the open, or he'll go forward into the open, right? And he doesn't have any line of sight, so he'll hear it, but he won't see any movement. I've seen him like, okay, they freeze maybe behind that tree or the block, and then they're like, okay, I'm going to keep walking. And then they walk forward, and all I got to do is settle the pin and shoot. And so that's the new plan. I set up like that toward the last couple of days, and it worked perfectly. It just didn't work. There just wasn't the buck that I wanted to shoot.
Yeah. So that way that you're talking about, that was one of those things I learned in Alberta. Was Jim set up all of his stands, or had you set up always with the tree in between you. And the way you'd set up is you'd lean your shoulder into the tree and you'd stand. He's like, I don't know if you watched that Sika film, The Quiet Place, that was about him, but he's kind of like a drill sergeant. So he's like, I felt like if I sat down, he could see me from somewhere. And so you don't sit down. So I'm just leaning against a tree, and you have your bow, hanging there that you were able to get off and be able to move slowly. But I started doing that even in Pennsylvania, which with the saddle now, the tree's always in between me. But if I'm using a stand, I was setting it that way because that obstacle helps. If you think about it, your platform's sticking out from the tree. You can't, no matter what camo you're using, or unless you're in like a hemlock or a pine tree, you're going to stick out like a sore thumb to those old, bucks when you're skyline,
Especially, it's no different than being skyline on the top of a hill. There's nothing to break you up. That was the other thing that I changed the last few days is I made sure that when a deer looked up at me, I had an entire forest or tree or boughs or something behind me, so I wasn't silhouetted in any way. That's hard to do in some of these open country. You just look like you're just on a pecker pole. It's just you sticking out. It's like, and that again, it tricks the young deer. It just didn't work on those older deer. You'd be relying on a buck just in the zone on a doe. Of course, if you get lucky and that moment happens, but what about a buck that's just cruising for does, looking for one? He's a little more wary, than one that's lost his mind. And even one that's lost his mind, the does are always still kind of on it. They're never as dumb as a buck is. And so it's not me trying to trick the buck. It's me trying to trick the doe, So I liked that scenario with an obstacle between me, let him walk behind that or on the other side of it when I go to draw. And all these little techniques, they add up. And like you were saying, I don't have time to stand up, grab my bow off a hook and then draw, especially when it's the heat of the rut. And he is going somewhere, So that's where I was like, as much as I hate doing it, I have my bow in my hand, like right there. It's just ready. You like the whole day, and you're holding it like 8 hours like that. But if you're the guy that has it on a hook, which my buddy Anthony did, the deer got away. Had he had it there and ready, the deer's dead. So those things matter. Being on high alert all the time, and it only matters when you're trying to kill the big dudes, the big dogs.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like if you just want to kill a buck, what we're saying, you can throw half it out the window.
Yep. But you're so right. I mean, I've been burned before by the bow on the hanger, and because and that's one of the things I've been taught since I was young. My dad's like, he doesn't believe in bow hangers. He's like, you always have your hand, you're ready to go. He's got his D loop, his release on his D loop. He's ready to go. And then there's me, and I was like, oh, I'm watching TV. They got these hangers, they got all this stuff, and I'm set up, and then all of a sudden I'm burned because I'm here with my hands in my pocket and I can't get my bow because this buck, in these type of areas,
these little movements,
same thing. They just pop out of nowhere because you're not looking at these big cornfields or anything. They're coming through the pine trees or whatever that might be and slipping in. It's it's a rush, and it's so difficult. I remember a scenario in Ohio. I was hunting in southern Ohio, which is similar in the Appalachian Mountains, and I was driving down the road, and I kept seeing 2 mornings in a row. I saw this big buck cross the road in the headlights, and I was like, he's coming out. There was some oaks on this side, and there was some bedding on this side. It looked like. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna hunt right next to this road. He's going in and out, So I went in there and I got caught with my bow on the hanger. He came in and he stared at me and he took off, and I was like, dang it. So I moved, made an adjustment. The next day it was like -10 with wind chill, and I had put a little one of those hand warmers that you shake up in between my grip and my hand to hold it there because I was so cold. But anyways, that was I've learned that lesson.
I've got a question for you. That margin of error on those big old bucks in those scenarios are so small. That time it takes to grab your bow off a hook that's a lot of movement and a lot of time that you don't that buck probably won't forgive you for. So just depends how bad you want it. And on that note, you're hunting the bow zone like that, and in some of these extreme temperatures, what do you do to stay warm? Like, what's your feet? Of course, they can get cold. What kind of boots? What kind of do you use? Hand, foot warmers, electric devices? Like, how do you cope?
Okay, so there's 2 different scenarios with the bow zone. I was being dropped off by a side by side, so you don't have to really worry about sweating by walking in. We had these big Canadian military boots. I had the toe warmers on the top and bottom of my sock, which I wouldn't recommend putting them in between sock layers because it'll actually burn your feet. But anyway, so that scenario is a little bit different. And then we had like felt on the stand. But if you're going, say, an area like I'm in Pennsylvania, or I know some of the people that hunt in, say, northern Idaho and stuff, I'm just wearing a lightweight boot. I'm wearing the crispy Wild Rock, the Gore-Tex ones that are 400 gram insulation, just light enough that your feet don't sweat real bad hiking in. And then I get to the stand and put an external warmer over top of it. So the company I use, they're out of business now, but it's called Hot Mocs. They're basically like a slipper that goes over top of your boot, and I slide a body warmer in those. And I know there's ones like Icebreaker, I think makes some now, and some other companies. They're like a booty that goes over top.
Yeah.
And for me, I can't wear rubber boots. For whitetails, my feet sweat when I'm hiking in, and then they're cold all day. No matter what I do for socks, I just wear my regular mid-weight, darn tough ones that I wear out hunting west with my Crispies, and I'm good down into the single digits doing that way. And if it's a little bit colder than that, I might need some more insulation on them. But for me, that's been the ticket.
It's interesting because we all have ways of dealing with that. And,
yeah,
I have those Alpha Burley 1600 gram insulate. I think they're 16 rubber, PVC, whatever boots. When I hike in, the only reason I've used rubber boots is because I've noticed a huge difference when a deer cuts your trail in rubber boots versus when they cut them in a normal pair of boots. We even watched it when we were there. Anthony and I walked in together, and as long as we walked a road, the deer didn't care if they hit Anthony's boot tracks on the road. But then he had to cut across a meadow, a sage flat, go over to where his stand was, and he climbed up the stand. Every single deer that hit his tracks froze, followed his tracks, looked around, and ran away. Every single one. And they smelled his tracks on the road, did not care. As soon as they smelled his tracks off-road, they got scared. So they expect some scent on the road, and the roads were UTV roads. People could drive them as long as they weren't hunting. They were just recreational. So there was a few UTVs that would hit the road every now and then throughout our hunt. But for the most part, I've seen that happen when I hunted blacktails as well. Come in rubber boots, nothing. Come in normal boots, a buck will hit that trail, stop, look around, and walk away. So I like rubber simply for the fact of keeping my scent off of a trail. That said, I've hunted out of normal boots lots of times. As long as I come in a way where they don't cut my trail, they're coming in from a different spot, it doesn't matter, right? Because they don't hit your trail anyway. So it just depends on the setup. Where we were hunting, these deer were coming from 360, and we hiked in a mile up of an old logging road, and they walked the road too. I didn't really want my scent on the road. Those Alpha Burleys are also really, really warm, super warm because of all that insulation. So I like that. But the downside is your feet sweat in them and they're wet. So when I hike in, I'm a sweater. I sweat bad.
Yeah.
So when I hike into an area, I'm basically in my long johns and that's it, and my rubber boots. So I'm pretty naked, even a t-shirt.
Yeah.
And a pair of long bottoms and my boots. I look ridiculous. And all my clothes are in my backpack. And I hike all the way in. Now my feet are a little sweaty when we get to the stand because of that. As soon as I get to the bottom of my stand, I basically change my socks because they're too wet. And I put on a fresh, clean pair of socks, a couple pairs. I put hot warmers in my boots at that time on the top and bottom of my feet. Stick my feet in. Then I wear the Sitka Fanatic gear, the coldest weather stuff. It's just unreal. So I'll throw that stuff on, with a few different layers depending on how cold it is underneath. And then I'll climb into the stand, get up there. I might put that stuff on after I get to the top too. Sometimes I'll put my clothes on up there instead of down below.
Yep.
And then once I'm up there, I'll break out some hand warmers for my hands. And I just do body warmers. I hate toe warmers and I hate hand warmers. They're too small.
Yes.
I do
the same thing.
I use the full length foot warmers that go my whole length of my foot. I might put a toe warmer on the top of my foot, at my toes if I want extra. And then I use body warmers inside the Fanatic pocket.
Yeah.
Right. And I try to keep my hands not in gloves. I don't like shooting with gloves. So my hands are almost always bare, or I have fingerless gloves. And I've got them in my pocket all day long. Now, when I'm holding my bow, I'll put a glove on my left hand, which is my bow arm. I'll put a mitten on that. And I can shoot really well, even though I have a mitten on there. And then I'll put hand warmers on inside the back of the mitten. So I have that. And so I'll have that bow in the hand and and usually I put the cam in the pocket of my Fanatic bibs.
Yep.
So the cam just sits there in the pocket and I can just hold it up there. My release is already on there. My thumb release is already on the D-loop, it's ready to go. And so then my hand's just in my hand warmer pocket and I'm just waiting for that buck. And I'll stand there all day like that. And that's kind of how I try to keep my hands and my feet warm, and overall warm.
I have a question for you. You mentioned about using a thumb release. So I started using one a couple of years ago. But the one problem I'm having is, and when it's really cold out, that when I'm drawing back just to practice draw and everything, I'm getting my thumb button caught on the neck part of my jacket because it goes up to keep your neck warm. And I'm setting off a trigger and I'm sending arrows into the scrape or whatever I'm sitting over, and it's been an issue. And I thought about going back to a trigger for that late season stuff, but I'm like, I shoot so much better with this thumb button. I feel so confident with it. And I didn't know if I think I put a custom barrel on mine that's bigger. And I think I need to go back to the smaller one for it just because it's just catches on everything.
I have the Carter based, the one from Dudley, the Knock to It.
Yeah.
For me, coming to full draw, I always have my thumb behind the barrel when I draw my bow, just pressing hard just to make sure I don't accidentally set it off.
Yep.
And then I'm fully anchored and kind of where I want to be before I ever move my thumb around the barrel.
Yep.
And then I don't have any trouble with it clearing any of my gear because I don't really have anything around. I don't like having my ears covered if it's at all possible.
Yeah.
Of course, sometimes it's so cold. In that case, I usually have some kind of ear thing covering my ears, but that I can hear through. So I like to use like the wind blocker, like a Sitka wind blocker hat, but I have it folded up so my ears aren't covered. And then I have another hat over the top of that covers my whole head plus my ears, but I can hear through it. That wind blocker hat, I can't hear through them. I hate not being able to hear. So I kind of run that way. My neck might be cold. I'll put a little gaiter or something around my neck only, but there's a space around my head that doesn't have anything covering it a lot of the time.
Well, there's something, I don't think it's been talked about yet, but there's something that Sitka has with the whitetail side that's going to help you with the hearing issue.
Really?
With the wind stopper. Yeah. It's changed the game for that. Cause I was the same way. I'd fold up. I look funny because I'd have everything folded up in the tree, and that's just the way I sat. And I hated that pressure. I hated not being able to hear and be aware. And I didn't like anything. It is. Yeah. Yeah. It's changed a little bit.
That's cool.
Yeah. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. All of these things, I enjoy the challenge. I mean, I love my mountain hunts that are backcountry, backpacked in 20 miles and so on. And I love my pack raft and hitting some areas that people don't go. But I also like hiking into some woods and climbing into a tree stand and trying to outsmart a buck, that way too, and playing a little chess match, a little patience game, and trying to arrow a buck at close range. I find it all exciting. And I don't care what technique I use. I want to kind of be good at all of them, or at least versed in each of them, because different situations call for different techniques for ultimate success. So,
yep. And it's funny, Brian, just one last point on that for me is you're talking about, taking what you learn in different aspects of different hunts and applying them to others. This year when we were hunting elk in Idaho, I'd killed my bull, and my buddies that were with, we were glassing this bull. He'd come out of the timber down into this meadow every night and go back up in, but he was coming out in different spots, but we were ended up hunting him almost like a whitetail. Like we were set up in these corridors where he's coming out, and it was funny. We're on these rock cliffs where he's coming out below, and had him he was at full draw so many times from two of my friends that it was ridiculous. Like this bull just seemed unkillable, but it was just, us, our inexperience with a lot of this. But it was funny, just, we changed tactics from what we were doing elk hunting and kind of took a little bit of a whitetail mindset to it. And it was really cool.
Absolutely. That's what I think is exciting about all of it is, different techniques and different animal behaviors, and you just learn year over year if you're doing it right, like what's work, what doesn't. And the journey is the funnest part, getting better.
I agree.
Well, we should wrap this up. I mean, people want to find your content, your Instagram handle. Give them your Instagram handle.
You can find stuff on my Instagram at beau.martonik. And also, if you just search Beau Martonik,
you're going to have to spell both, bro. Like,
okay.
The first name and the last name.
So, all right, at BEAU.Martonik, MARTONIK. So that's That's my Instagram handle. And then all the podcast stuff is at East Meets West Hunt. That's pretty straightforward. And also anything else at eastmeetswesthunt.com.
And we'll put links to all of this in the description field on our YouTube channel. And you can find you can quick access our YouTube through briancall.com, our website, and go there and you can get some quick links if that works for you. And give Beau a follow and check out his podcast. I think you will all enjoy it.
Yeah, Brian, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. It's been a long time.
Yeah, it has. All right, man. All right, brother. Thanks for coming on, and we'll catch you later, man. Stay gritty.